Aidan Hutchinson was robbed of one of the greatest defensive football season in NFL history. A player that was on pace to break the single season sack record, a player that was easily the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year and had the potential to lead the Detroit Lions franchise to their first Super Bowl appearance in NFL history, had his career year cut short with a brutal injury in week 5, snapping his leg into two entirely separate pieces. Aidan Hutchinson's season came to an end. In this offseason, it seems like everybody's kind of forgetting about how good Aidan Hutchinson actually was. There's a lot of discourse around, will Aidan Hutchinson have enough help when he returns? Who's going to pass rush alongside Aidan Hutchinson? But there's not a lot of talk about how good Hutchinson will be in his return. And if there is, that discourse has been quite negative over the last few days. Like about a week and a half ago, there was a video that was released of Aidan Hutchinson working out, of turning the corner, of doing some sprints on, just a field in a training facility. And a lot of people took away that Aidan Hutchinson didn't look very good in that video. And a lot of people have already started to stake their claim that Aidan Hutchinson's career is over before ever returning from that injury. So today, we're going to take a look at Aidan Hutchinson, take a look at where he came from, how good he was a season ago, what he's done in his NFL career, and why there is still potential for him to return and be just as good, if not better, than he was a season ago. Now, Aidan Hutchinson, of course, as all Lions fans know, was the second overall pick in the 2022 class from the hometown Michigan Wolverines. Standing at 6'7", 275 pounds, Aidan Hutchinson finished his final collegiate season with second in the Heisman voting, a first team, a consensus All-American, and the 2021 Defensive Big Ten Player of the Year. Taking a look at his final season at college, he was, of course, really good. Being an All-American, being the Defensive Player of the Year, and arguably the best defensive conference in college football, you had to put up some pretty good numbers. And on top of leading Michigan to a college football playoff berth, he recorded 62 tackles, 17 TFLs, 14 sacks, 3 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. With his impressive collegiate career and really his impressive final season, he was catapulted into being the #1 prospect in the 2022 NFL draft. He was projected to be the #1 overall pick by almost every consensus big board out there. And yet on draft night, that didn't come true. On draft night, the Detroit Lions would get lucky. They would have their wishes granted and have the hometown kid return to Detroit as a professional. The Jacksonville Jaguars would select Javon Walker with the first overall pick, a player that turned out to be a really good player, had 10 sacks a season ago, has been a consistent and really good versatile pass rushing piece for that Jacksonville defense, and by no means was a bad pick for Jacksonville. But Aidan Hutchinson has been on a completely different level than anybody else from his draft class. Not just Javon Walker, but obviously from the rest of the draft class as well. In his rookie season, Aidan Hutchinson was phenomenal. 52 tackles, 9.5 sacks, leading his rookie class in sacks, 9 TFLs, 15 quarterback hits, 3 passes defended, 3 interceptions, and 2 fumble recoveries. He finished second in NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year voting, only behind Sauce Gardner, while having more interceptions than the player that would actually take home the award. He led the NFL rookies in sacks and interceptions that season and still didn't win the award. But that didn't stop him. He went into year 2 even better. His second season was one of the best we've seen from a Lions pass rusher in a very long time. Aidan Hutchinson in 2023 looked like a completely different player with 51 tackles yet again, but 14 tackles for loss, 5 more than the season prior, 11.5 sacks, 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles, and 7 passes defended. Aidan Hutchinson was now beginning to be looked at as one of the premier edge rushers in professional football. He was one of the best and most explosive pass rushers in the draft. Then he was one of the most explosive and best pass rushers in the league. In 2024, he finally put those finishing touches on his game and became one of the best players in the entire league, period. While only playing in 5 games last season, Aidan Hutchinson totaled 19 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 7 TFLs, and a forced fumble on the year. He only played 4 games and 2 quarters of his 17-game possible season, and was still one of the best players. He was far and away in the lead for Defensive Player of the Year when he went down with his leg injury. He was on pace to potentially break Michael Strahan's single-season sack record at the time of his injury, and he looked to be having one of the most prolific defensive seasons anybody has ever seen across this league. Now, of course, in that game versus Dallas, Aidan Hutchinson would go down with a season-ending injury, breaking his fibula and essentially snapping his leg into two completely separate pieces. The good news, it was a clean break. There was no muscle tear, there was no ligament damage, there was no severe injury outside of the bone break in and of itself. And while that may not sound super positive, that is probably the best case scenario for an injury like this. The worst thing that could happen is that the bone splinters, that it tears a muscle, that it doesn't break very cleanly and causes a lot of, issues in the rehab process. None of that came true. And although Aidan Hutchinson would miss the rest of his season, doctors, analysts, and really anybody within the know of the situation fully expects Aidan Hutchinson to make a full recovery. Now, taking a look at that offseason recovery, it's been going well. Aidan Hutchinson is done with rehab, and at this point in the process is learning to trust his leg again. Taking a look back at that video that was posted on Twitter and Instagram and social media, it was very clear that Aidan Hutchinson was healthy, that he was healed, right? He wasn't really bracing that leg a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot of pain when he was running on that leg, but there was still a process to be done. Aidan Hutchinson did still have to learn to trust that his leg was going to support him again. And that video received a lot of backlash. There was a lot of people online saying that Aidan Hutchinson would never return to the player that he would, that he looks completely different than the player we saw in 2024. And that simply isn't true. I personally went through and I timed it. I recorded both his video that he put on Twitter a few weeks ago, as well as the same drill at the NFL Combine. Now, why the circles and the radius weren't exactly the same, Aidan Hutchinson's time was nearly identical, meaning at worst case scenario, before he's fully trusting his leg again, he is the same type of explosiveness, the same type of bend, same get around the edge that he was as a rookie. And even if that was the player the Lions got back, I think that would still be a success. I think that would still be enough for the Detroit Lions pass rush, but that isn't necessarily the only ceiling that Aidan Hutchinson has, because we've seen this injury before, and we've seen a very similar injury to this before when J.J. Watt did it in 2017. Now, when J.J. Watt broke his leg, he was 27 years old. He returned for his 28-year-old season a year later and played in all 17 games at a very high level. But what's really strange about this injury, and I guess something that a lot of people haven't quite looked at, but I think is really important to see for Aidan Hutchinson, is J.J. Watt's injury was not just very similar, it was nearly identical. While J.J. Watt was about 4 years older, it was the same exact injury to the same exact leg, to the same exact bone, and even the same part of the bone that broke. It was in the same game of the season and even the same quarter of the NFL season. Both players were on pace for great potential Defensive Player of the Year runs, and both had their seasons cut short. A lot of people at that time said J.J. Watt, especially going into his year 28 season, potentially coming out of his physical prime as an NFL pass rusher, began to give up on J.J. Watt. It was 2 years of straight injuries, and really, J.J. wasn't the same player that he was going in to that 2018 season. There was a lot of scrutiny, there was a lot of question marks, much like Aidan Hutchinson is facing today, and J.J. Watt silenced the doubters. In 2018, J.J. Watt returned to the Texans with 61 tackles, 18 TFLs, 16 sacks, a career-high 7 forced fumbles on the year, 4 passes defended, and was named once again a unanimous first-team All-Pro player. He was the best defensive lineman in football, just a season removed from that brutal leg injury that ended his season a year prior. The same injury, again, to the same leg, the same bone, the same quarter of football of the season that Aidan Hutchinson has just returned from. On top of that, we have heard from different Detroit Lions coaches, and they have some very positive things to say. You take a look at the new defensive line coach in Casey Rogers, a player that has never worked with Aidan Hutchinson before, and he said that Aidan looks really good. The leg looks good. He looks explosive. He looks ready to get back on the football field and looks to have that tenacity back. And Kelvin Shepard used the word supernatural to describe what Aidan Hutchinson looked like. A player that not too long ago, just a few months removed from a broken leg, looks as good as Aidan Hutchinson does. Now, the good news for Lions fans, the Lions still have another 2 to 3 months before Aidan Hutchinson even needs to be ready. So while his quote and really his talking point of returning for the Super Bowl may have been a little bit overzealous, that probably wasn't happening in hindsight. Aidan Hutchinson should be ready for the NFL season. Aidan Hutchinson probably could be ready for the NFL season right now. He is healed. He said himself that he is completely done with rehab. And at this point, it's just about building that muscle back. It's about learning to trust that leg again. It's getting over the mental hurdle of what happened to him in week 5 in Dallas a season ago. But if he can do that, if he can get past the mental block of knowing that his leg will not break on him again, he will return to being just as good of a football player as he was in 2024, if not even better. I would expect a phenomenal season from Aidan Hutchinson. I would expect minimum double-digit sacks, minimum double-digit tackles for loss, potentially in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, and certainly in the running for Comeback Player of the Year. The Detroit Lions are getting their special teams ace back. They are getting the best defensive player in their franchise and potentially the best defensive player in the NFL back on their roster. And whether he has help or not, he's going to dominate. He is going to play phenomenal football for the Detroit Lions, and the NFL should be very, very worried. So with all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Just a little bit of news on Aidan Hutchinson. I thought it was very interesting that the coaches talked about it with some really positive things to say. I personally, along with several NFL and Detroit Lions fans, were quite encouraged by the video, even if the large majority seem to have more negative connotations for it. But with all that being said, let me know down in the comments below. What do you think about Aidan Hutchinson's recovery? Do you believe that he could return to the player he once was? Do you think he'll take a step back from where he was in 2024? Or do you believe he could even continue to grow, get better from this experience, and be a better player in 2025 than what we even saw a season ago? I'd love to hear your guys' opinions down in the comments below. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.